You're in a meeting and your colleague says something and the thought assaults you. What a stupid idea! What do you do then? You want to be honest and you want to be respectful. If you're honest and you speak your mind, it's not going to work very well. Telling your colleague that that's a stupid idea is likely to upset him and not generate a good working environment. On the other hand, if you're respectful, saying, that's really interesting. Well, you know that's not true. You don't think that's really interesting. You think that's a stupid idea. So how can you combine these two things? How can you be honest and respectful when you think that the other person said something stupid? You and your partners have to communicate in order to collaborate. Without creating a common informational environment, it's impossible to decide what to do, how to analyze the situation, who is going to take care of what, and then things will not get solved. Being able to share what's true for you and listen what's true for the other is the foundational step of a good working relationship, an effective working environment. The problem is that many of the thoughts that we have, the truths that we have to share with other people, are quite toxic. They are likely to upset other people. So then, because we know that, we hold back. We withhold our truth, and we say something that we think is going to please them. But by pleasing them, we hide a very important part of the problem that needs to be solved. So that's likely to lead to frustration. This creates a real dilemma, because you cannot choose your thoughts. So the truth of what you think is just there. If you think the idea is stupid, that's what you think. You can't change it. But if you say it's stupid, then you get in trouble. And if you don't say it's stupid, and you say it's interesting, you also get in trouble. So how is it possible for people to collaborate without upsetting one another when this dilemma affects all of us? We're going to look at these situations that are likely to end in destruction of relationships, ineffectiveness, bad feelings, just a whole mess that starts with the inability to speak and listen to each person's truth. By the end, you'll be able to turn the most difficult conversations into constructive dialogues. The transformation of a difficult conversation into a constructive dialogue has 3 steps, 3 skills that you have to master. The first one is learning how to listen. There's a special way to listen that has to be learned. The second is learning how to inquire, not only to understand what the person says, but why does the other say what they say? What do they think that leads them to say what they say? And the third is to express, to speak your truth in a way that the other person can hear without reactivity. Let me warn you, these 3 steps are very simple. These skills are so basic that as soon as I tell you what they consist of, you will say, I knew this. But when it counts the most, you will not want to use them. It's so amazing that we know the skills, and we know that they're much better than not using the skills. But when the situation becomes hot, when it really counts, you don't want to listen. You don't want to ask questions, and you don't want to really speak in a way that the other person can receive you. It's a little bit like a diet. You can read the book, and you know exactly what the diet consists of. And when you read the book, you say, yes, I'm going to do this, I'm going to eat properly. But the true diet is not when you read the book. The true diet is when you sit at the table, somebody puts the chocolate cake, and you say, am I going to eat this chocolate cake, or will I choose the apple instead? And when it counts the most, it would be very challenging to use these skills. I was once working with the CEO of a very large company who had received very tough feedback. And essentially, the content was, he didn't listen. So everybody said, he's closed, he never asks questions, he doesn't listen to us, he doesn't pay attention to us, and so on and so forth. So after doing this assessment, I sat down with him, and I asked him, well, what do you think? And he said, well, Fred, I really need to learn how to listen. Sounds good. Do you want me to teach you how to listen? Yes, of course, teach me how to listen. Shut up. What do you mean? Shut up. If you interrupt people and you speak over them, then you can't listen, and you keep interrupting people. So if you want to listen to people, the first step is to shut up. Is that surprising to you? Well, no, it's not news. This is obvious. Yes, it's obvious. So you know how to listen. You know that you have to shut up in order to listen to what other people say. Is that true? Yes, that's true. So the real question is, why do you choose not to shut up when you know that shutting up is the first step to listen? You see, this is not a skill. Being quiet is not a skill. Being quiet is a choice. But that choice depends on whether you think you have something to learn in the conversation, or you think that you already know better than the other person. And that's where listening goes astray. Listening is not just being quiet. Listening is being open to receive the other person and let them know that you are truly receiving them and honoring what they have to say. Unless in your mind you're open to it, unless you become a learner in the conversation, you cannot listen. Unfortunately, most of us are knowers. We're big-time knowers, we know-it-alls, we already think, oh, I know better than the person, so why would I waste my time listening to this person if I already know? That's what makes this really hard. The difference between the knower and the learner is the difference between arrogance and humility. The knower arrogantly assumes she already knows everything. The learner is humble. It has what in the Zen tradition is called a beginner's mind. It's like, I don't know. I have some ideas, but I don't know what the other person thinks. I don't know what the other person has seen. I don't know what other people want. There's so much I don't know that I can be curious to learn what is it that they can add to my knowledge. This is the story of a German professor who had gone to Japan to learn about Zen. In his studies, he had read many, many books, but his teachers have told him that if he really wanted to learn about Zen, he actually had to speak with a live Zen practitioner, a very wise old monk who lived up in the forest. So this German professor went to Japan and visited his colleagues at the university, and one day he got the interview. He was accepted to visit this hermit. So he went to the forest and came to the hut of the monk, walked in, and the monk received him with a beautiful smile. Come in, let's have a conversation. It was very, very nice. The German professor started immediately jumping in to say, well, let me discuss with you some of my ideas about the origins of Zen. And the monk stopped him and said, wait. Before we speak about Zen, we need to have tea. Okay, well, let's have tea. So he turned around and started boiling the water. And while he was heating the water, the professor was telling him all the books he had read and all the papers that he had read and how many studies he had done about the Zen. And the monk was just quiet, boiling the water. Then he finished boiling the water and started preparing the tea. And the professor was telling him all the discussion he has had with his very learned colleagues about the philosophy of Zen, the practices and all. And the monk was just quiet, smiling very pleasantly. And then the monk said, the tea is ready. So he got the tea and gave the professor a cup. So the professor was holding the cup, still telling him all the things that he knew about Zen and the questions he had and how he wanted to discuss all the ideas. And without saying a word, the monk started pouring water. He kept just pouring water, pouring water, pouring water, all the way until the cup got to the end, and then it overflowed, and the water just spilled, burning the hand of the professor. And the professor said, stop, it's full, there's no room for any more. And the monk said, just like your mind. In order to listen, you have to empty your cup. If you're so full of yourself, then there's no room to pay attention to what other people have to say. And that was the problem of the CEO. It wasn't knowing how to listen. It was that he knew too much. And he was so full that he had no room to receive the truth of the other. So once you've worked with yourself and you have created this space within where the other person can pour their truth, when you're open to receiving them, What are you supposed to do so they actually know that you're receiving them? You see, it's not enough to listen. You have to demonstrate that you're listening in a way that the other person will accept that you're listening. Because there's an emotional connection that has to be established in the act of listening that goes far beyond the exchange of information. Have you ever been in a conversation where you're talking to someone and this someone is reading the newspaper? And the person says, yeah, I'm listening. And then you get so frustrated that you say, you're not listening to me. He turns around and says, yeah, I'm listening to you. I can repeat everything you said. So you said this, and this. And he's right. But it doesn't matter. Because what he is telling you is the content of the information, but he has not established an emotional connection that leads you to believe that he's truly paying attention to you. That's why listening is so fundamental. It's not just knowing what the other person thinks. It's really establishing this link where we are going to work together. There are 4 steps to listen in this way. The first step is to be quiet. Shut up, as I said to the CEO, it's a little violent. But in a sense, you want to not interrupt the person. Let them say what they have to say. The second step is to summarize what they said. You want to feed it back to them so that they can actually hear that you heard it. The third step, as a sign of respect, you want to check that what you told the person is actually what they intended to say. Sometimes you make a perfect summary and yet they will say, no, but that's not really what I wanted to say. So the check is not just for your own memory, but it's also to let the person correct the message that they had sent to you. And the fourth, and perhaps the most important, is to acknowledge the validity of what the person said as their perspective. You see, you're not going to say, okay, you're right, and give up. That's not a good way to listen. But you can always say, I can see that you think of the world this way, or I understand that you see the situation this way. And you have the right to interpret the situation the way you want to interpret it. This is your view. So you are the owner of your view, and I'm willing to respect your right to hold it. Really listening is hard because it goes against the grain of our culture and our training. From the very early age, we learn to not listen. And that is a consequence of developmental aspects of our mind. That's why listening requires an evolution of consciousness. This cube, it's a tool that one of the most famous developmental psychologists in the world used to prove this point. His name was Jean Piaget, a Swiss psychologist who worked with kids to understand how is it that human beings develop rationality. He liked to do very simple experiments to see how is it that children think. And a beautiful one is with a cube like this. He would take this cube, that as you see is red on one side and green on the other side. He would give this cube to the child and let the child familiarize himself with the cube. So, let's say a 3-year-old child would look at the cube and say, oh, it's nice to play with it. And then came the test. Piaget would sit across the table from the child so that he was looking at the green side and the child was looking at the red side. And he asked the child, what color do you see? A normal 3-year-old would say, oh, I see red. But the trick question, or the difficult question, was, what color do you think I see? A 3-year-old will always say red. Because when you're 3, you don't have the capacity to take the other person's perspective and do the mental geometry required to understand how the world is seen from the other side. There's only one way, and it's my way. When you're 3, that's cute. When you're 43, that's dangerous. There are a lot of executives that have more than 40 years of experience in being 3. Once you've listened to the other person, you know what they think. But you still don't know why they think what they think. And that's where inquiry comes into place. You want to ask them questions not to know more of what they think, but to actually understand what leads them to think what they think, to understand the reasoning process behind the words that they just said. This requires a certain skill because it's not obvious to unravel or untangle the ideas and the process that a person follows in his or her own mind to come up with a certain conclusion. Most people will tell you their conclusion, but they will not tell you how they reach that conclusion unless you ask them. It's a little bit of a trap to think that because you heard what they said, you really know what they think. You know an aspect, you know the surface. It's like an iceberg, you know maybe 1/6 to 1/10 of what they think. But underwater, there's still the other 9/10 that remain hidden unless you actually look and you ask them. How do you inquire? Well, the first thing is to explain to the person that you really want to understand what leads them to think what they think. And you can ask just that question. It's like, that's really interesting. Why do you think that? Of course, you see that you have to be genuine in your curiosity. If you don't care why they think what they think, you can't ask this question genuinely. It's going to come across as fake, and it will upset the other person. So being a learner continues to be paramount in this part of the process. So you can ask them, okay, I understand what you think. I'd like to know why you think what you think. So do you have any data, or what have you seen, or what have you felt that leads you to believe such idea, or believe what you just said? After they tell you, you can say, well, what's really important to you? That's the second question. What is really important to you in this situation? Then you can ask them, and what would you like to have happen? Is there something you would like here? And finally, what do you propose? These questions follow the temporal structure of our minds, the past, the present, and the future. So what someone thinks, this is the present, is what I'm thinking now. What have I seen that leads me to believe what I believe now? It's the past. What evidence do you have? What logic have you followed? So it's like asking the process, coming from the past to the present, what brings you to this moment? And then when you understand what's important to the person in this moment, you're saying, what would you like to do in the future? Where do you want to go? And this question is not just an aspirational question, but the essence is, what do you suggest we do? Because many times people will say something, well, I don't like that. Okay, you don't like it. What would you like? Well, I would like something different. Okay, but what do you suggest we do to get there? Because that's the tough question. Many times I will propose something and I don't particularly like it too much, but it's the best that I can propose given the situation. So if another person has a better idea, then they have to make the suggestion. And if they say, I have no suggestion, well, even though it's not that great, your proposal still stands. So these are the 4 things you can do. You can ask the person what leads you to think what you think, what's important to you, what do you suggest we do from now on? These 3 ideas will carry the conversation to the next step. You've listened, you've inquired. Now it's time to express your truth and to do it honest and respectfully. How can you speak your truth, honest and respectfully, when you think the other person is an idiot? Remember the question? Let me try to answer it starting with my daughter, Michelle. Michelle didn't eat broccoli. I was trying really hard to encourage her to eat broccoli, but she wouldn't try it. I kept asking her, why don't you eat broccoli? Why don't you try it? I said, no, I don't want broccoli. I said, why, Michelle? Why? Because broccoli is yucky. That's why I don't like it. Now think about that. Broccoli is yucky. That is why I don't like it. The direction of causality is from the essence of broccoli, which is yuckiness, to her experience, which is I don't like it. Is that true? No. You know that's not true. The fact is, she doesn't like broccoli, or she thinks she wouldn't like it, but she never tried it. But because she doesn't like it, or she thinks she's not going to like it, she projects her inner experience to make it a part of broccoli. She makes it a quality of the thing. That is the essence of arrogance, to say the world is the way I experience it, as opposed to the world is how it is, and I have certain reaction to it. As I said before, for a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old, that's funny. But then when people grow up, they keep thinking that way. It's very dangerous. And that's why it's impossible to be honest and respectful when you're arrogant. The key to combine honesty and humility is to become humble, to stop being a knower and to become a learner. So what could Michelle say? Michelle could say, I don't like broccoli, and that's why I don't want to eat it, or I actually think it's yucky. That is the logic of an adult. That's the logic of a humble learner. Think again about the meeting. Now this person said something and you just think, my God, what an idiot. Now, I don't know about you, but I've done extensive research on idiots. I have a large data set. I've talked to a lot of idiots, and I found a shocking regularity, a perfect statistical correlation between idiots and people that disagree with me. Think about it. Have you ever met an idiot that thought exactly like you? An idiot that agreed with you 100%? Probably not. And now is the key question. Is it that they are idiots as a constitutive thing of their personality, and their idiocy leads them to disagree with you? Or perhaps they disagree with me, and because I don't like the fact that they disagree with me and it irritates me, I call them idiots. Can you see the difference between the 3-year-old logic and the adult logic? The 3-year-old arrogantly says, oh, you're an idiot, and because you're an idiot, you disagree with me. The adult, humble learner will say, no, you disagree with me, or what you say doesn't sit well with me, or I don't understand, and it's an I statement. And because I don't understand, I have an immediate reaction, and I tend to insult you. But there are no idiots. Idiot is not a quality of the person. It's not a description of the other. Idiot is simply a way of saying, I am upset about what you just said. I disagree with you. I don't understand you. And this creates a very fundamental difference between the language of the knower, which is dangerous, and the language of the learner, which is inviting and safe. The language of the knower, it's always you language or it language. It's second or third person. You are an idiot. It is wrong. This is the wrong way to go about it. That is ugly. You see, it's always second or third person, dangerous. The language of the learner is always first person. I don't understand. I don't see how your proposal is going to help us accomplish our goal. See, I language is not just nice. It's not, oh, that's really interesting. No, I language speaks your truth, but does it respectfully, because you're allowing for the fact that perhaps the other has an answer. So when I say, I don't understand how that is going to lead to the result that we're pursuing, you may have a good answer. And I'm not committing that your answer is wrong. I'm simply saying, at this point, I don't know, and I'd like to find out. This works either way. If you don't have an answer, then you have to acknowledge you don't have an answer. And if you do have an answer, and I like your answer, then I can say, oh, I didn't understand first, but now that I understand, I really like your proposal, let's go with it. So it's very flexible when you express your truth in a humble way. When you express, you follow the same 4 steps that you follow when you were inquiring. What do you think? Why do you think what you think? What's important to you? And what do you suggest to do about it? So now imagine that the person is asking you these questions. And you express, here's what I think. Here's why I think what I think. This is my evidence. This is my logic. Here's what's really important to me. And finally, this is what I suggest we do about it. See, that's always respectful, because you're never imposing your truth as the only truth. That's what creates the conflict. Not that you think something different than the other person, but that your thought has to exclude the thought of the other person, and there's no way to integrate. So by speaking in first person, you can be honest and you can be respectful because you're humble. How do you turn then a difficult conversation into a constructive dialogue? First, the step 0 is to become a learner. Stop being a knower and take the position of humility of the learner. After you've done that inside yourself, you listen. You pay attention and you let the other person know that you're really listening to them. Second, you ask them, why is it that they think what they think? And you get into the process of their thought. Not just the finished product, but the process of creating that product in their mind. And third, you express your truth honestly and respectfully. You know every part of this, but as I said at the beginning, it's hard to do because when it really counts, when the other person is saying something that upsets you, you don't want to listen. You don't want to understand why they're saying this because it upsets you. And you just want to interrupt them and tell them, you're an idiot. You don't know what you're talking about. Here's a way to start practicing with low level of stress. So don't start trying to lift a 1,000-pound weight. Take a baby step, lift a 5-pound weight. And this is how you do. Choose a friend, choose a partner, a friend, a family member, and simply go and ask them, how was your day? And then really listen. Just practice listening. Let them speak and be quiet and acknowledge and summarize and say, maybe then ask them some questions. How did you feel about that? Just be open and listen. You will be shocked by the consequences of this very simple behavior.